The crape does not shine. That is the whole point of it, that it cannot, that it must not, that for a year it will take the light and give nothing back. You know this before you open your eyes with your hands in the dark. Your fingers have found the sleeve of the dress laid ready over the chair, and the cloth is wrong, not the cool slip of silk, not the soft give of wool, but something dry and crimped and faintly gritted, like the skin of a thing that was once alive and is not any more. It rasps very softly when you draw a finger along it, and it is cold. It holds the cold of the room the way no other cloth does, so that to lift it is to lift something colder than the air. There is no bell here to tell you the hour. The clock on the landing, the tall one, your husband's, the one that filled this house with its slow, even heartbeat for 11 years, that clock is silent. It has stopped at the hour he died, and it has never since been wound. The silence where its ticking used to be is the loudest thing in the house, the first thing you hear every morning before anything else. The hour it shows is the only hour this house keeps now. So you do not know, lying here, whether it is 4 in the morning or 6. You know only that it is dark and cold, and that the dress is black, and that the black does not shine. From today's view, this might look like a small thing, a woman, a dark dress, a quiet room. But you are not allowed to put the dress aside, and you are not allowed to wind the clock, and you are not allowed for a year to be seen by anyone in any color but this one. The cloth that gives nothing back is not your choice, it is your shelter and your sentence at once. You were Mrs. Merrow. You are still Mrs. Merrow. You will be Mrs. Merrow this year in a way you never quite were while he lived, because now the name is all of him you are allowed to keep where anyone can see. You belong this year to the dead.
Hey everyone. Tonight we're stepping into the strange, suffocating, oddly tender world of Victorian mourning, a world where grief came with a rule book and the rules ran for 2 full years. We'll spend tonight inside one house with one woman in the hardest first year, a widow named Agnes Merrow, 34 years old, who has done nothing wrong and broken no law, and who has been quietly sealed away from the living world all the same, by a set of rules everyone around her believes is a kindness: the drawn blinds, the covered mirrors, the black cloth that bleeds in the rain, the clock no one will wind. It was meant to protect her. It also buried her a little beside the man she lost. And that quiet, two-edged cruelty, a cage built in the shape of a shelter, is what tonight is really about. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this, a quiet like helps the channel more than you'd think. If this is your kind of thing, consider subscribing. And drop a comment. Where are you listening from, and what hour is it there? I love knowing who's awake with me around the world. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft background hush if you like, and let's step into Agnes's black year together.
You rise in the dark, because the dark is what the house gives you now, and you have learned not to ask it for more. There is a candle. There is always a candle, because the gas is not lit in a house of deep mourning before the family is up. It costs, and there is no one to see by it, and seeing is not, this year, a thing the house is arranged to do. So you find the candle by touch, and the match by touch, and you strike it, and for a moment the small flame throws your own shadow up the wall, enormous and black and shapeless, the only large thing that will move in these rooms all day. Then it settles, and by its light you begin to understand again, the way you understand it fresh every morning, what kind of house you are living in. It is a house with its eyes closed. And you should know, lying here, that the house did not decide this for itself. There is a rule for everything you are about to do, and the rules were written down in the household manuals that sat on 10,000 parlor shelves, in Cassell's and the Queen, and the etiquette columns a widow's sister would read aloud to her, so she would not, in her grief, commit some error the neighbors would remember for 20 years. How long the blinds stay down, how long the black is worn, and then the half-black, and then the gray. 2 full years, the book said, for a widow, longer than for any other loss a person could suffer. And behind every line of it stood the one woman the whole country was watching, the Queen herself, who had lost her Albert and gone into a black that she would never once, in 40 years, take off again. You belong, this year, to a grief the Queen made the fashion of. The rules you are about to obey were her rules first. You are only the smallest, poorest copy of a sorrow that a nation had agreed to perform. So, go to the window first, because the window is where you would expect the mourning to come in, and the window is where the house refuses it. The blind is down. The blind has been down for a year. Not the half-drawn blind of an ordinary sleeping room, lifted with the first chore of the day, but a blind pulled to the very sill and left there, and behind it the heavy curtain drawn across as well, so that the two of them together make a wall where the glass should be. You could lift it. Your hand knows exactly how the cord would feel, the small resistance and then the soft clatter of the slats going up. But you do not lift it, because the street must not see in, and you must not see out, and the light must not come in to fall on a face that is not, this year, permitted to be seen in the light. So the window stays a closed eye. The mourning arrives on the other side of it and is turned away every day, like a caller who has not been told that no one here is receiving.
The mirror is next, and the mirror is worse, because the mirror has been covered. You remember when it was done, the morning after, when the house was still full of low voices and the smell of too many flowers, someone, your sister, or the woman who came to help, you cannot now recall which, took a length of black cloth and hung it over the glass above the mantel, and over the smaller glass on the landing, and over the little oval one in your own room where you used to pin your hair. They did it gently, the way you do a kindness you are sure of, and no one explained it, because everyone already knew the reason, the old reason, older than anyone in this house could tell you, that a mirror in a house of death must be covered, lest the soul newly gone be caught in the glass, or the living who look too soon see something that is not theirs to see. You do not quite believe this. You are a sensible woman. You were a sensible wife, and yet you have not lifted the cloth, because under the practical fear there is a truer one, and the cloth speaks to that one instead, that you do not, this year, want to meet your own face, that a widow is not supposed to consider how she looks, that vanity and grief cannot share a room, and so the room has been arranged to make the choice for you. The glass is still there, behind the cloth, holding the whole room in its silver patience, but it has been told to close its eye, too, and it has. So you move through rooms that cannot see you, and the strange thing, the thing you could not have explained to yourself a year ago, the thing that is the whole shape of this year, is that you cannot quite be seen either, not by the house, not by the street, not on most days by another living soul. This is the part no one warns you about. They warn you about the grief, Everyone is ready for the grief. The grief is expected. The grief is correct. The grief has a costume and a calendar and a set of rules, and in a strange way the rules make the grief almost easy because they tell you exactly what to do with it from the moment you wake. What no one warns you about is the erasure, that the same rules that dress your sorrow so carefully will also, just as carefully, take you out of the world. That to be a widow in deep mourning is to be present in every room and absent from every life. You are here. You are more here than you have ever been, fixed to this house, sealed inside it, unable to leave it for anything but church and the most necessary errand, and even then veiled, even then a moving column of black that other people's eyes slide off of, because they have been taught, as you were once taught, that it is a kindness not to look. You are here, and you have been made invisible by the very care that surrounds you.
Consider the door. The front door of this house has a knocker, a good brass one, your husband's pride, polished every week of his life by a girl who no longer comes. And the knocker is bound. Someone has wrapped it in a strip of black cloth, tied tight, so that a caller who lets it fall will hear not the bright authoritative crack of brass on brass that says a person is here, attend to them, but a soft, smothered, almost shameful little thud. The cloth eats the sound. That is its only purpose, to eat the sound of anyone trying to reach you. Callers still come. You hear them sometimes, the soft thud, the pause, the small scrape of a card slid through and left on the salver in the hall. Black-edged, every one of them, the mourning border a full quarter-inch wide if the loss they are marking is close, a thread of black if it is not. For even the paper people wrote on had its rules, and a caller would no more send an unbordered card to a house in mourning than walk in wearing scarlet. They come, and they are not received because you are not, this year, a person who receives. They leave their square of bordered paper as proof that they came, and the proof piles up on the salver, a small white drift of people who thought of you and were turned gently from the door. You will read the names later by candle. It is the nearest thing to company you are allowed. And the clock. You have not forgotten the clock. The tall clock on the landing, his clock, stopped at the hour he died and never since wound. You stopped it yourself, or someone stopped it for you in the first hours, because that is what is done. You stop the clocks. You stop them so the house keeps the hour of the death, holds it, refuses to let it slide away into the ordinary stream of hours that carries everything off in the end. It was meant as reverence. It was meant to say, time stopped for us here at this hour, and we will not pretend it did not. But a year is a long time to keep 1 hour. A year is a long time to walk past a stopped clock 4 and 5 times a day, to glance at it out of the old habit of a person who wants to know the time, and to be told every single time the same thing, not the hour of the morning, not the hour of the afternoon, but the hour he died. The clock does not tell you the time. The clock tells you the loss, on the hour, on the half hour, on every passing of your eye across its still white face. The blinds keep out the street. The cloth keeps in the light. The wrapped knocker keeps out the world, and the stopped clock keeps him, mounted on the landing wall, where you must meet it 12 times a day.
From today's view, all of this looks like superstition dressed as sorrow. Covered glass, bound brass, a dead clock, a house full of small dark theaters performing a grief that surely no one needs performed so hard. From their view, from inside the black cloth and the closed blinds, it was something else entirely. It was the only language the age had for a wound it could not otherwise speak. The Victorians did not have the words you have. They had cloth and shutters and stopped clocks and a 2-year calendar of black, and they used these things the way you might use words, to say the unsayable. Someone we loved is gone, and we will not behave as though the world is unchanged, because for us it is. That is the kindness in it, the genuine, aching kindness folded inside every airless rule. And that is what is so chilling, that the kindness and the cruelty were the same object. The cloth that protected the soul also blinded the mirror. The quiet that honored the dead also erased the living. The hour kept in reverence was the hour that could never heal because the house would not let it pass. So you stand in the hall, in the dark, in the black dress that gives nothing back, between the closed eye of the window and the closed eye of the mirror and the closed brass mouth of the door, with the stopped clock keeping its one terrible hour above you on the landing. The house cannot see you, and outside the street is waking. Carts, a dog, a man's voice calling something ordinary, the whole loud living world going on exactly as it did, 3 feet away, on the other side of a blind you are not allowed to lift. You belong this year to the dead, and the house, with its eyes closed, has agreed to keep you here, where they are.
There is a cloth that was made to be ugly on purpose, made at great expense and real ingenuity to do the one thing every other fabric on earth is made not to do, to take light and give nothing back. It was woven in English mills by the bale, sold by the yard in warehouses built for grief alone, and worn by women who had no say in the matter. And right now, in the dark, with your fingers, you are wearing it head to foot. It is called crape, and no one tells a widow what it actually is. They only tell her she must wear it. So let me tell you what it is. It is silk. You would never guess silk to touch it, because everything that makes silk lovely has been taken out of it on purpose. Ordinary silk is smooth and cool, and it catches the light and gives it back in a soft, running shine. That is the whole reason a woman wants it. Crape is silk that has been punished out of all of that. The thread is woven loose and hard, and then the cloth is pressed between heated rollers, grooved like a washboard, so that it comes out crimped, goffered, ridged all over with tiny waves that will never lie flat and never take a smooth fold. And then it is gummed. It is stiffened with a gum that holds the crimp and kills the last of the shine, so that the finished cloth is dry and rasping and matte as ash. It does not shine. It cannot shine. That is the whole point of it, that it must take the light and give nothing back. This is not an accident of the cloth. It is the meaning of the cloth. In a world where every other fabric a woman owned was made to flatter, to gleam, to drape, to make her visible and lovely in a lit room, crape was made to do the exact opposite. It was made to absorb, to deaden, to announce to anyone who saw you across a street, before they were near enough to see your face, this woman is in grief, and the deepest grief there is, and you will treat her accordingly. The dullness was a language. The whole country could read it. A glance at the depth of black a woman wore, and at how much of it was this lightless, crimped crape, and how much the plainer stuffs beneath, told a stranger exactly who had died, and how recently. A husband, and within the year, if she was sheathed in it from collar to hem like this. You did not have to speak your loss. The cloth spoke it for you, in a language of dullness that everyone had been taught from childhood to understand.
And there was an industry built on it. This is the part that would surprise you, if you had room left to be surprised, that your grief was a trade. There was a single firm whose name was on half the black in England, Courtaulds, that grew rich, enormously rich, on mourning crape. that ran whole mills in Essex, turning out nothing but this lightless silk for widows who would never meet one another, but were all, at any given moment, dressed in the same dead black. There were warehouses in London given over entirely to mourning goods, where a newly bereaved family could buy in a single grim afternoon every black thing the rules required, sorted by the depth of loss. Your grief had a price list, your sorrow was stock on a shelf. From their view, this was simply good sense and good service, a kindness even, to spare the stricken family the labor of assembling it all. From today's view, there is something chilling in it, an entire prosperous industry whose product was the visible performance of a woman's worst year, sold by the yard. And that is what is so unsettling, that the cloth which meant, "I am too broken to be seen," was, to the men who wove it, simply Tuesday's order, baled and shipped. You know the cloth best, though, not by what it means, but by what it does. It is cold. You have learned this in the worst way, on the worst mornings, that crape holds the cold of a room the way no honest wool ever would, so that to put it on at 6 in an unheated house is to wrap yourself in something colder than your own skin, and to stay cold inside it half the morning, the chill of the cloth and the chill of the grief grown so alike you can no longer tell which one is making you shiver. It smells of nothing alive. That is the strangest thing, and the thing you cannot say to anyone. Wool smells of the animal and the lanolin and the rain it has been caught in. Cotton smells of soap and of the body. Crape, with its gum and its hard dead finish, smells faintly of the size and the dye and something dry underneath, something with no warmth in it at all. The smell, you have decided privately, of a thing that was made never to be loved, only to be worn, and then, when the year is done, put away or destroyed. You have pressed your own sleeve to your face more than once in the dark, the way you used to press his coat, hunting for some human smell in it. There is none. The cloth gives nothing back to the nose either. And then there is the rain.
No one warns you about the rain. They tell you to wear the black. They do not tell you that the black is not fast, that the dye and the gum in mourning crape will not survive a wetting. So the first time you are caught out in it, hurrying the few necessary streets to church or to the chemist's with your veil down, and the rain comes, you do not understand at first what is happening. You feel the cloth go heavy and limp where it strikes you, and then you see your own gloved hands, and they are streaked. The crape is bleeding. The black is running out of it in long gray-purple lines, down the cloth, onto your gloves, onto your wrists, and where it touches your skin, it stains, a dull bruise color that does not wash off for days, that you scrub at over the basin by candlelight and cannot lift, so that for the better part of a week you carry the mark of your own mourning dress soaked into the backs of your hands like something gone wrong under the skin. The cloth that was meant to clothe your grief with dignity turns in a shower of rain into something that runs and weeps and stains you. Grief made suddenly, humiliatingly literal. The black, quite literally coming off on you, marking you, refusing to stay where it was put. You learn after that to watch the sky as you never watched it before. A widow learns the weather the way a sailor does, because her grief is not waterproof. It wears badly on the body, too, this cloth. The crimped, gummed surface is harsh against the wrists and the throat, and over a long day it chafes, a low, constant, mean little friction at every place the black meets bare skin, so that the rules which seal you into mourning also, very quietly, rub you raw.
There were physicians later who said the stuff was unwholesome, that the dye and the dressing in cheap crape could sicken the wearer, who was sealed into it month after month, the dust of it breathed in, the dye of it taken through damp skin. Whether that was true or merely feared, you cannot say. You know only that by evening the back of your neck is sore, where the high black collar has worried it all day, and that this too you are not permitted to complain of, because the soreness is invisible, and the grief is supposed to be larger than any soreness.
You lay it over the chair at night, and it does not fall like cloth. It keeps its shape, stiff and hollow, holding the curve of the shoulders and the bell of the skirt, so that across the dark room it looks in the last of the candle like a second, smaller woman crouched there in the corner, a black, hollow person made of nothing but the dress, waiting to be stepped into again at dawn. You have stopped looking at it before you blow the candle out. The cloth keeps your shape when you are not in it. There are nights that feels like the truest thing the whole house could tell you, that the black has more substance now than you do, that you have become the thing inside the dress rather than the dress being the thing upon you. From today's view, it is only fabric, a sad, ugly, ingenious fabric, a curiosity in a museum case now, behind glass, with a small card explaining what it was for. From their view, it was the most eloquent thing a grieving woman owned, a cloth engineered, thread by gummed thread, to say the one thing she was not allowed to say aloud, which was, "I am not, this year, a person in the ordinary world." And that is the chilling thing about the cloth that cannot shine, that it was both the most honest garment she would ever wear and the most imprisoning. It told the truth about her grief to every stranger in the street, and it sealed her, cold and chafed and stained to the wrist, inside that truth for a year and more, with no shine in it anywhere to remind her that light was a thing that still happened to other people. You smooth the dead cloth down over your knees in the candlelight. It rasps very softly, the one small sound it makes. The crape gives nothing back. You belong this year to the dead, and you are dressed head to foot in the proof of it.
There is one black thing in this house that you were not ordered to wear, that no manual required, no warehouse sold, no rule compelled. You chose it. And of everything you put on in the dark, it is the only piece that has a man inside it. It is small. It would fit in the cup of your palm and leave room to close your fingers over it, which is what you do some mornings before you pin it on. Close your hand around it in the dark and hold it the way you cannot hold the thing it is made of. It is a brooch. The frame of it is jet, true jet, the black stone they cut and polished by the ton in Whitby, up on the cold Yorkshire coast, a whole town bent over lathes turning fossil wood into mourning jewelry for the women of a grieving nation. Jet is light in the hand, lighter than you expect a stone to be, because it is not really a stone at all, but the pressed black remains of trees that died before there were people to mourn anything. It takes a high polish, and it is warm to the touch in a way real stone never is, warming quickly to the heat of your skin, so that wearing it does not feel like wearing a cold ornament, but like wearing something that wants to be warmed. That, too, is part of why a widow chose jet. It was the one black she was permitted that did not punish her for touching it. But the jet is only the frame. It is the setting, the dark window. What it holds, what it was made to hold,
what you carried to the jeweler in a twist of paper and could barely let go of across the counter, is a lock of his hair. This is the thing no museum card quite explains when you see one of these behind glass a century and a half from now and read the small label that says mourning brooch, hairwork, c. 1870 in its neutral curatorial hand. It does not say this is a piece of a person. It does not say that the fair brown coil set under that glass, woven into a tight flat plate no wider than a bootlace, or curled into a little wreath, or worked into the shape of a feather or a knot of wheat, that this was cut from a particular head by a particular hand in a particular unbearable hour, because the people of this age could not accept that a body simply went into the ground and was gone. Hair does not rot. Hair is the one part of a person that does not corrupt, that comes away clean and stays exactly as it was, the precise color and spring it had in life. So they kept it. They cut a lock before the coffin closed. Everyone did. It was as ordinary as drawing the blinds, and they had it worked by women who did this for a trade, into jewelry you could wear against the skin. It was not thought morbid, it was thought tender. It was the nearest thing the age had to keeping someone, not a photograph which was only light and shadow, but the actual substance of them, the real fiber of the real man, woven and set and worn over the heart.
And so this is the chapter where you must finally let him have a name. Thomas, his name was, and the hair in the brooch is his, and it is the precise color you are trying not to remember as you look at it. Fair brown, a little darker at the root, with the one persistent strand of early gray at the left temple that he was vain about, absurdly, a man with no other vanity in him at all. You can see it in the plate work if you look closely, that one paler thread the hair worker did not know to discard, and so it is there, his single gray hair, set in jet, worn on your breast every day of this black year. You did not tell the woman who wove it. It felt like a secret between you and the stone. He was not a remarkable man, and you would not have wanted him to be. He was a clerk, a draftsman, properly, in an office that did the patient drawings for other men's grand schemes, and he came home at the same hour every evening with ink in the creases of his right hand that no washing ever quite took out. And he was kind in the small, unshowy ways that you did not know to treasure until they stopped. He warmed the bed on the cold side before you came up. He never once read the paper to its end without telling you the one thing in it he thought would interest you. He called you by a name that was not your name, a private, soft, foolish name that no one else in the world ever used, and no one else in the world now ever will, because the mouth that said it is the one in the ground. That is the part of widowhood the rules cannot dress, not the loss of the man, the loss of the only person who called you the secret name. There is no crape for that. There is no warehouse that sells it back. He died of a fever. It is important, somehow, that you tell it plainly. There was no violence in it, no accident, nothing dramatic enough to make a story of. He came home warm one evening, and warmer the next, and by the third day the doctor had stopped meeting your eyes, and on the fourth the house went quiet in the particular way houses go quiet, and the clock on the landing was stopped at the hour it happened, and has not moved since. It was an ordinary death. That is the cruelty of it. It was the kind of death that took 10,000 Thomases that same winter and made 10,000 brooches like this one, each holding its own particular lock of its own particular hair, each worn by its own particular woman who thought, as you think, that hers was the real grief and all the others merely fashion.
From today's view, the hair brooch is the strangest thing in the whole catalogue of mourning. Faintly macabre, a little ghoulish, a piece of a corpse worn as an ornament, the sort of thing that makes a museum visitor lean in and recoil at once. From their view, it was the most loving object a person could own, not a symbol of death, but a piece of life, saved, the one part of him that decay could not have, kept where you could put your hand on it. And that is what is so chilling and so tender, both at once, which is the whole truth of this year, that the same age which sealed you in cold cloth and stopped your clocks and made a public industry of your sorrow, also gave you this, a way to carry the actual warmth-taking substance of the man himself, woven by hand, set in warm black stone, over your heart, in the one piece of black you were never ordered to wear, and never once in all this year took off. You pin it on now, in the dark, by touch. The clasp is small, and you have learned to work it without seeing. The little give, the catch, the faint cold press of the jet settling against you through the crape. The cloth gives nothing back. The jet gives back your own warmth, slowly, the longer you wear it. And somewhere inside it, no wider than a bootlace, plaited flat by a stranger's patient hands, is the fair brown hair with its one gray thread of a kind, unremarkable man named Thomas, who warmed the cold side of the bed and called you by a name that is gone now and has been keeping the hour on the landing for a year. You close your hand over it once, the way you do. You belong this year to the dead, but here, at least, in this one small, warm black thing, the dead belongs a little to you.
The door that eats sound opens, this once, for a woman you did not invite and cannot refuse. She comes because she must, because even a house with its eyes closed must, in the first days, be fitted for its grief, and grief in this country does not come ready-made for a body it has not measured. So she comes, the mourning dressmaker, the woman from the warehouse, sent round with her tape and her pins and her flat black book of patterns to take the measure of you for the cloth you will live inside for the next 2 years. She is the first living person to cross the threshold since the men carried the coffin out of it, and she will not be the last of her kind, but she is the first, and you will remember her the way you remember the first of anything that marks a before and an after. You do not know her name. That is the first strange thing about her. She is in your bedroom, her hands moving over your body with a frank, professional intimacy no one has used since Thomas, and you do not know what to call her, and she does not offer it, because she is not in the arithmetic of this house a person you are meeting. She is a service the warehouse provides. She has measured 100 new widows this year, and she will measure 100 more. And she has learned, you can see that she has learned, to do it without quite meeting the eyes of the woman under her tape, because the eyes are where the trouble is, and she has a great deal of work to get through before dark. She is gentle, though, you notice that. There is a particular gentleness that people who handle the freshly bereaved acquire, a softness in the hands and a lowness in the voice that is not warmth exactly, it is technique, it is the manner of the trade, but that lands on you in your rawness, almost like warmth, almost like being touched by someone who knows. She turns you by the shoulders the way you might turn a child. She lifts your arm to run the tape from shoulder to wrist and says, "If you please," very quietly. And you please, and you stand, and you let yourself be measured, because there is a strange relief in being moved about by hands that know exactly what they are doing, when nothing else in your life knows what it is doing at all. And as she measures, she names things. This is the second strange thing, that the whole catalogue of your sorrow has a vocabulary, and she speaks it the way a fishmonger speaks of his fish, plainly, by rote, because to her it is stock. The bodice will be this, the collar will be that. There will be the crape, of course. The best you can do, ma'am, is the best courtauds, laid on in deep bands to the depth your loss requires, which for a husband is the deepest there is, the crape rising nearly to the waist in the first year, falling back by inches as the months are served. There will be the weeping veil, the long one, the one that comes down over the face and the shoulders and turns you in the street into a moving column of black with no face in it at all. There will be the widow's cap, the small white-bordered indoor cap that says to anyone admitted to the house, "This woman is in mourning, even here, even in her own rooms, even when no stranger can see." There will be cuffs and collar of plain white lawn, the one permitted brightness, and only because the rules require something to be changed and laundered against the black. She names it all and writes it in the flat black book, and you understand, listening, that your grief is being itemized, that it has a parts list, that somewhere a clerk, a man like Thomas, in an office like Thomas's, will add it to a column and send a bill. That is the third strange thing, and the cruelest, and the one no one warns you of, that all of this costs, and that it costs you, and that the costing does not wait for the grief to ease. The mourning must be bought at once, in full, in the first raw week, when you are least able to think of money, and most in need of it. For the rules will not be kept on credit of feeling. The rules want pounds. A widow's mourning, done as the manuals say it must be done, could cost more than a laboring family saw in half a year. The crape alone, that lightless punished silk, was dear, and it did not last. It bruised and bled and wore out and had to be renewed, so that the deeper your respect, the heavier your bill, and the woman with the tape, gentle as she is also the front of an industry that has arrived to convert the worst week of your life into an order. From her view, she is doing you a kindness and a service both, sparing you the labor, dressing your sorrow correctly so the neighbors cannot fault you. From today's view, there is something almost obscene in it. A saleswoman in the bedroom of a woman widowed 4 days, taking the measurements for 2 years of compulsory black and writing the price in a book. And that is what is so chilling, that the kindness and the commerce wore the same gentle face, spoke in the same low voice, and could not, even by you, be told apart. She is not the only one the door admits in those first days. There are the others, the cast of a grief, the people who arrange themselves around an absence. There is the woman who comes to do the house, to hang the cloth on the mirrors, to bind the knocker, to turn the cards as they arrive and stack them on the salver, to manage the small black machinery of a household in mourning because you cannot be expected to, and a house in deep mourning that ran itself would look somehow indecent. There is your sister, who comes and stays and reads the etiquette columns aloud, and means every bit of it kindly, and is, you have begun to notice, a little in love with the correctness of it all, with knowing exactly what is done and seeing that you do it. There is the clergyman, briefly, with his particular voice. There is the doctor, once more, to sign what must be signed. And there are the callers who are not admitted at all, the soft thud at the bound knocker,
the pause, the black-edged cards slid through and turned onto the salver, who were part of the cast precisely by their absence, by being people who came to the edge of your grief and were not let in, and left their bordered paper to say so. They move around you, all of them, in a slow, careful orbit, and you are the still dark thing at the center that they are arranging themselves about. And here is the loneliest part, the part you could not have predicted, that to be so surrounded, measured, managed, called upon, prayed over, billed, is not the opposite of being alone. It is a kind of being alone. Every one of them is in the house because Thomas is gone. Every one of them is an answer to his absence. Not one of them is here for you, the particular woman, the one he called by the secret name. They are here for the widow. The widow is a roll and a parts list and an order in a book and a soul to be comforted, and you, the woman inside the roll, stand at the center of all that gentle motion and are somehow less visible the more of them there are. The dressmaker finishes. She winds her tape and closes the flat black book on the sum of you and gathers her pins, and at the door she does the one thing you will actually keep. She stops and looks at you, properly, for the first time, eyes to eyes, and says very low, "I'm sorry for your trouble, ma'am." Not technique, that. You can tell the difference now. Just a woman who has measured 100 widows saying the plain true thing to the 101st. And then she is gone, the sound-eating door closing soft behind her, and the house is quiet again, and you are alone again in the particular way you are always alone now, in a room being arranged by careful hands around the shape of a man who is not in it. You belong this year to the dead, and the living, God help them, have come with their tape and their book to measure you for it.
There is a calendar in this house that has nothing to do with the year, and everything to do with how much black you are still required to wear. Most calendars count towards something, a birthday, a harvest, a wedding. This one counts away from something. It begins at the hour Thomas died, the hour the clock on the landing still keeps, and it runs forward in stages so precisely marked that a stranger, meeting you in the street, could read off it like a label exactly how many months you had served. For the rules of mourning were not vague. They were not a matter of feeling, of grieving as deeply or as briefly as your own heart required. They were a timetable, fixed and public, and known to every woman in the country. And a widow's term, longer than any other grief the rules recognized, ran a full 2 years and 1 month, divided into stages, each with its own permitted cloth, each with its own date of expiry. The first stage is the one you are in, deep mourning, a year and a day at the least. This is the crape stage, the lightless, punished silk laid on thick, rising nearly to the waist, the long, weeping veil down over the face out of doors, no ornament permitted but the jet, no relief anywhere in the whole costume but the narrow white at the collar and cuff. In deep mourning, you are not to be seen in society at all. You are not to attend the wedding, the dinner, the dance. You are not, properly, even to be seen to enjoy the air. You belong, this first year, entirely to the dead, and the cloth is arranged to make that plain to everyone who passes. Then, when the calendar permits, and not 1 day before, for to shorten it is a scandal the neighbors will hold against you for a decade, you enter second mourning. The crape comes off by degrees. This is the strange particular cruelty of the timetable, that your grief is eased not when your heart eases, but when the date arrives, and that the easing is measured in inches of cloth. The deep bands of crape are taken up, lifted, reduced. The veil may be worn back off the face,
a little more white is allowed. You are still in black, head to foot, but a black that has begun, microscopically, to breathe. Second mourning runs some months more.
And then, at the far edge of it, half mourning, the longest, palest stage, and the one that would have astonished you a year ago when black was simply black. For half mourning is not black at all. It is the permitted colors of the recovering widow, and there are only 3 of them, and they are precisely fixed: gray and mauve and a particular soft purple lilac, the colors of a bruise fading. After 2 years of unbroken black, to be permitted at last a gray gown or a touch of mauve at the throat was meant to feel like spring, and was, for many women, less a relief than a fresh grief, because to put off the black was to admit that the worst of it was over, that you were rejoining the living, that Thomas was receding into a past you were now, by the calendar's permission, allowed to survive. That is the thing about the calendar of black. It does not only tell you when to mourn, it tells you when to stop. And both instructions arrive from outside you, from the timetable, from the manual on the parlor shelf, never from your own heart, which keeps no calendar at all, and would, left to itself, grieve in no order anyone could publish. But the calendar is only half of it. The other half is the bill. This is the part the rules never speak of, and every widow learns at once, that all of this cloth, this 2-year wardrobe of grief by the inch, must be bought, and that it must be bought by a woman whose income has just died. Consider the arithmetic, because it is brutal and exact. A full set of widow's mourning, the gowns and the crape, the long veil and the caps, the black gloves renewed as fast as they wore, the cloth replaced as the crape bruised and bled and gave out, could run to 15, even 20 pounds across that first year. Thomas, at his desk, with his ink-stained hand, had earned perhaps 90 pounds in a year, a clerk's wage, a careful, decent, unremarkable wage, which means that 1/4 of everything the man ever earned in a year was now to be spent all at once in the rawest weeks on the cloth whose only purpose was to announce that he would never earn it again. You are to perform his death in a costume that costs 1/4 of his living. And the pen that earned the 90 pounds has stopped. That is the silence under all the other silences in this house, louder in its way than the stopped clock. When Thomas died, the income died with him. There was no pension worth the name for a clerk's widow. There was no salary that continued. It was whatever he had managed to put by, which for a careful man on 90 pounds a year was never very much. And there was perhaps a small insurance, for the prudent Victorian man feared exactly this, and many a husband's last quiet act of love was a policy that would bury him and clothe his widow's grief. And after that, there was the arithmetic of a woman alone, doing sums by candlelight that she had never in her married life had to do. How long will it last? How much is the rent, the coal, the single servant you can no longer perhaps afford to keep? How much, God help you, did the mourning itself cost against what there is to live on? The rules require you to look bereaved. The rules do not care how you are to eat while you do it. From their view, none of this was cruelty. The timetable was kindness. It spared a stunned woman the labor of deciding anything, told her exactly what to wear and when, gave shape and occupation to a grief that might otherwise have drowned her. And the expense was simply respect. You spent on mourning what your loss was worth, and a woman was worth the most, and a woman who stinted on her black announced to the parish that she had not loved him enough.
From today's view, it is hard not to see something colder in it, a society that demanded its most vulnerable members, its newly widowed women, with their incomes freshly buried, spend money they did not have to perform a sorrow they did not need reminding of, on a strict published schedule for 2 years, on pain of social ruin if they fell short or finished early. And that is what is so chilling about the calendar of black, that it dressed an economic catastrophe, a woman losing in a single hour both her husband and her entire means of living, in the language of love and decency, so that the grief and the ruin became to everyone looking on the same respectable thing.
You keep the calendar in your head now, the way you once kept the household accounts. So many months served, so many to go. The date the crape may first be lifted, the far, almost unimaginable date when gray will be permitted. You count toward them both at once, and under that count runs the other one, the harder one, the one in pounds and shillings, what is left, how long it lasts, what happens at the end of it. 2 calendars, both running away from the hour on the landing. One measured in cloth, one measured in coin, and you in the middle of them, in a gown that cost 1/4 of all he ever made, doing the sums of a widow by the light of a single candle the house can barely spare. You belong this year to the dead, and the living have sent you a timetable for it and a bill.
A letter comes for you, and the rules say you may not answer it. That is the whole of the cruelty, and it will take this chapter to say it slowly enough. It comes on an ordinary morning, slid through with the bordered cards, except that it is not a card and it is not bordered, and that is the first thing you notice, that among the small white drift of mourning paper on the salver, every piece of it correctly edged in black, there is one envelope with no black edge at all. A plain envelope. A living envelope, you think, before you can stop the thought, because everything else in the hall has been dressed for death, and this one thing has not. You know the hand on it before you have crossed the floor. You would know it anywhere. It is not Thomas's. Thomas's hand is in the drawer upstairs, in the few letters of your courtship you cannot make yourself burn. But it is a hand from the same country of your life, the warm country, the one before the clock stopped. It is the hand of someone who loved you before you were a widow, and does not, you can see from the unbordered envelope, quite know yet what you have become. And you cannot send one.
Not will not, may not. There is a difference, and it is the difference this whole chapter turns on. It is not that you have lost the words, though you have. It is not that grief has taken your hand, though it has. It is that the rules, the published, known, immovable rules of your mourning, forbid it. A widow in deep mourning does not write letters of the ordinary kind. She does not correspond. She does not keep up the warm, small traffic of friendship and news and invitation that is the whole tissue of a living social life, because to do so would be to behave as though she were still living one, and she is not, this year, permitted to be. She may write what is necessary, the business letter, the note to the lawyer, the brief acknowledgment of a condolence, itself written on paper edged in black to match the grief it carries. But the warm letter, the living letter, the letter that answers a friend in the friend's own light, ordinary key, that she may not write. To answer this envelope in the spirit it was sent would be a small scandal. It would be a widow forgetting herself. It would be a woman in crape behaving as though the crape were not there. So you sit with it, and here is where the ache begins in earnest.
because the letter does not only ask to be answered, it opens a door you have kept shut and shows you, for the length of a few sentences, the whole life that is going on without you on the other side of the blind. The writer mentions, in passing, the most ordinary things: a walk taken, a child grown an inch, some small plan for the spring, and each ordinary thing lands in you like a stone in a still well, because each one is proof of the enormous fact you spend all day not looking at directly, that the world has not stopped, that outside this house with its eyes closed, time is not held at the hour on the landing. It is running, fast and bright and careless, carrying everyone you love forward into springs and walks and inches grown, while you sit in a sealed dark room in a cloth that gives nothing back, forbidden even to call after them. The stopped clock keeps the hour of Thomas's death. The letter is a window onto every hour since, all the hours the rest of the world has gone on having without you.
You compose the reply in your head, because that much no rule can forbid. You are good at it. You always were. You arrange the warm sentences you are not allowed to write, the answer to the question, the small joke that would have made the writer smile, the news of your own that you can never now send, which is the news that you are alive in here, that you are still yourself behind the black, that you have not become only a widow, even if you must look like nothing else. You write the whole letter in your mind, perfectly, the way you can only write the things you will never put on paper. And then you do the thing the rules require instead. You take a clean sheet. You take the pen, Thomas's pen, you realize, halfway through. You have been using his pen all this year without quite noticing, the same nib that earned the 90 pounds, and you write the permitted thing, the brief, cold thing, on paper edged in black, a few stiff lines of thanks, an acknowledgment, a closing that shuts every door the writer had hopefully left open. I am not able to receive at present. I am much obliged for your kindness. The grammar of a woman behind glass. And you seal it, and it will go out, and the writer will receive it and understand correctly that the door is closed, and will not write again, because one does not press a house in mourning, and that too is a kindness, and that too is the rules working exactly as they were built to work. This is the moral peak of your year so far, and it is worth stopping on, because nothing about it looks like cruelty from the outside. No one has struck you. No one has even been unkind. The letter was kind. Your reply was correct. The writer's silence afterward will be considerate. Every single party behaved beautifully. And yet a thing of real violence has happened in this quiet exchange. A grieving woman, at the precise moment she most needed the warm hand of the living world, was required by the rules of her own grief to refuse it, to seal herself further in, to convert a friend's reaching out into one more closed door, and to do it herself, in her own hand, with her dead husband's pen, on paper bordered in the black she could not take off. The rules did not merely permit her isolation, they conscripted her into building it. They made her the keeper of her own sealed room.
From their view, this was protection of the tenderest. A widow in the rawness of deep grief should not be troubled with the demands of society. The rule that freed her from correspondence was a mercy, a fence built to keep the noisy living world from pressing on a wound. She need not perform cheerfulness she did not feel. She need not answer. The rules answered for her and shielded her and let her grieve undisturbed. From today's view, from a world that has learned at great cost that the grieving most need not to be sealed away, that isolation is the thing that turns sorrow septic,
It reads almost unbearably wrong. A society taking its freshly bereaved and, in the name of protecting them, walling them off from the precise human contact that might have carried them through. And that is what is so chilling about the letter you may not answer, that the kindness and the cruelty were, once again, the very same act. The fence that protected you was the fence that imprisoned you. The rule that spared you the world was the rule that took the world away. And the hand that closed the door, in the end, was made to be your own. You put the sealed, black-edged reply on the salver for the morning, and you keep the other letter, the kind one, the living one, the unbordered one, because you cannot make yourself burn it any more than you can burn the courtship letters in the drawer. You put it with them, a small stack now, in the dark of the drawer, the warm hand from before the clock stopped, kept where you can find it, unanswered, unanswerable, a window you have shut and cannot quite board over.
And later, much later, in a part of this story you cannot see from where you sit tonight, that drawer and what it holds will matter more than you could ever guess. The letters you were not allowed to answer do not vanish because you did not reply to them. They wait. Paper is patient. Paper outlasts the hand that folded it, and the rule that silenced it, and the woman who could not burn it. And it has a way of surfacing, long after, in front of strangers who will read it with no rule at all to stop them, and will understand, holding it, the one thing the rules worked so hard to keep unsaid, that there was a living woman in here the whole time who wanted to answer. But that is for later. Tonight there is only the drawer and the small stack and the sealed correct reply waiting on the salver to go out at dawn. Tonight there is only you, at the window you may not open, having written the perfect letter where no one will ever read it, and the permitted letter where everyone will. You belong this year to the dead, and the rules have seen to it that the living, however gently, however lovingly, can no longer quite reach you, and that the hand which seals the last door is yours.
A widow's day has no events in it. That is the first thing to understand, and the last, and almost the only thing, because a day without events is not a short day. It is the longest kind of day there is. So let the hours come slowly, the way they actually come. There is no hurry in them. There is nothing in this day that must be done by a particular hour, because the hour that mattered is the one on the landing, and it has already happened, and everything since is only the long, soft after. You wake before the light, because you always wake before the light now, and there is no reason to rise and no reason to stay, and so you lie a while in the gray and listen to the house. It makes the small sounds it makes, the settling of timber as the cold goes out of the night, the far-off cart in the street, the first one, the one that means the living world has begun again on the other side of the blind. You do not get up to meet it. You let it pass. You let several of them pass. And then, with no decision in it, you rise, because the body rises eventually, even when the heart sees no occasion for it. The candle, the cold cloth, taken up and put on by touch, the clasp of the jet found in the dark, the water in the basin, which is cold because the fire is not yet lit, and you have learned not to mind. You wash your hands and your face slowly in the cold water, and the cold is not unpleasant. It is only itself. It is one of the small, plain facts of the morning that ask nothing of you,
and give nothing back, like the cloth. You dry your hands on the same towel you dried them on yesterday. You will dry them on it again tomorrow. The towel is part of the day. Everything is part of the day. And the day is very long, and there is room in it for the smallest things to be noticed, because there is nothing larger competing for the noticing.
Then the slow round of the rooms. Not work exactly, but there is little real work for a woman who receives no one and goes nowhere, but the small tending that keeps a quiet house from becoming a dead one. You straighten what does not need straightening. You move the one chair a half-inch to where it has always stood. You take the cloths from the breakfast things and fold them along their old creases, the creases your hands know. And the folding is pleasant in the way that any small certain thing is pleasant now. It has a beginning and an end. It comes out the same each time. It asks nothing of you but your hands. You set the folded cloth in the drawer with the others. You close the drawer. That is a thing accomplished. In a day with no events, the closing of a drawer is a thing accomplished, and you let it be one, and you do not despise yourself for it, because the day is long and must be crossed somehow, and it is crossed like this, one small closed drawer at a time. The light changes behind the blind. You can follow the whole of the morning by it if you sit where you can see the pale line where the blind does not quite meet the frame. It begins gray. It warms by imperceptible degrees to a thin gold when the sun is somewhere over the roofs across the street. It is the only clock you trust now, not the dead one on the landing, but this slow brightening line, this patient hand of light moving across the edge of a window you are not allowed to open. You watch it the way you might once have watched a face. It is company of a sort. It does not speak, and it does not ask to be answered, and it changes so slowly that to watch it is very nearly to sleep with your eyes open. There is the needle in the middle of the day. A widow may sew. Sewing is permitted. Sewing is even encouraged, the quiet, useful work of the hands that occupies without exciting. And so you sew. Plain work, the turning of a hem, the strengthening of a seam, the small black stitches going into the black cloth where no one will ever see them. The needle goes in and comes through and is drawn tight and goes in again. There is a rhythm to it that asks for no thought at all, that lets the mind go loose and gray and wandering, and the hours that pass with the needle in your hand are the easiest hours of the day, because they are full and empty at once, the hands full, the mind empty, the long afternoon passing stitch by stitch by stitch in a lull so complete it is almost rest. In and through and tight and in again. The thread shortens. You do not hurry it. There is more thread and more afternoon, and the two will end at about the same time if you let them.
You take a little food at some point, because the body asks and you answer it, though without much interest. Bread, tea gone lukewarm because you forgot it, and drunk anyway because to make more would be an event, and there are no events. The plainest things. You eat them at the corner of a table, not laid, because a table laid for one is a sadder thing than a corner used plainly. And you have learned these small economies of feeling the way you learned the economies of coin. You wash the one cup. You dry it on the towel. You set it on its shelf. Another thing accomplished. The afternoon goes gold behind the blind and begins very slowly to go gray again at the other end. And the silence is not empty, though it sounds empty. This is the thing you have learned in the long hours, that a quiet house is full of small sounds, and that to listen to them is a way of not being entirely alone.
the tick that is not the dead clock, but only the cooling grate, the settling, the faint far life of the street, muffled by the blind to a soft wash of sound with no edges, rising and falling like something breathing. A bird sometimes in the small yard behind, going about its bright, ordinary business with no notion that the house it sits against has its eyes closed. You listen to it all. It is the texture of the hours. It is what fills the long room of the day when nothing else will, and you have come to find it not unbearable, but almost soft, almost kind, this wash of small, unmeaning sound that asks you for nothing and lets you simply be there, inside it, breathing in time with the muffled street.
The evening is the easiest, because the evening is permitted to be still. No one expects a widow to do anything after dark but be quiet, and you are good now at being quiet. The single candle, the fire, if there is to be one, small, the blind already down, it is always down, but as the dark comes outside, the dark inside and the dark outside grow level, and for an hour the blind seems hardly to matter, because there is nothing on the other side of it to keep out. You sit, you let the fire go down. You do not, most nights, light a second candle to read by, because reading is an effort, and the day has used what little effort you had. You only sit in the small warm circle of the one light, in the cloth that gives nothing back, and let the long day finish itself around you, the way a tide goes out, not all at once, but by a slow withdrawal you cannot quite catch in the act, until you look up and find the fire is embers, and the candle is low, and the day, the long, eventless, accomplished day, is somehow over after all. And then the stairs, by candle, slow. The cloth laid over the chair where it keeps your shape in the dark. The jet unclasped and set down, the bed cold on the side that was always warm, and the last of the hours, the ones with no name, the ones between lying down and sleep, when the small sounds of the house go on without you, and the line of the blind goes dark at last, and there is nothing left of the day to cross. You belong this year to the dead, and the days you spend belonging to them are long and quiet and full of small, soft, accomplished nothings, and they pass in the end the way all the hours pass, slowly, and then all at once, and then it is dark, and you sleep.
There was a year before this year. You forget that some days, the way you forget there was light before the blinds came down. But there was a whole ordinary year, and the years before it, and you can go back into them here in the dark, because memory is the one room in this house with no rule on its door. So go back, not far, only to last winter, the one before the fever, when the clock on the landing still moved and you did not know its hours were numbered, because no one ever does. Thomas came home at the same hour every evening. You could set the kettle by him. There was a particular sound the gate made under his hand, not the latch, but the small particular weight of him on the gate, a sound you knew before you knew it, so that you were always already turning toward the door when it opened. He came in with the cold on his coat. That is the first thing, the thing your hands remember before your eyes do. The cold of the outside air still living in the wool of his coat when he came in, and how he would, some evenings, lay the cold backs of his fingers against your neck just to make you start, and laugh when you did, the same laugh every time, a man delighted by the smallest reliable joke in the world. His hands had ink in them, You have said this already in the dark, turning the brooch, the ink in the creases that no washing took out. But you did not say how you came to love it. You came to love it because it was the proof of his day, the mark of the hours he spent bent over other men's drawings so that this house could have its coal and its joint of meat on Sundays and its small, safe, ordinary evenings. The ink was the day on him. You used to take his right hand sometimes after supper and turn it over in the lamplight and look at the ink in the lines of it, and he would let you, and neither of you said anything, because there was nothing to say. It was only a wife looking at the day written into her husband's hand, and being glad of him, and not knowing, how could you have known, to be more glad? The evenings were the whole of your happiness, and they were made of almost nothing, which is the thing you understand now and could not have understood then. He read the paper. He never read it to its end without finding the one item he thought would interest you and reading it out. A curiosity, a scandal in a far city, the price of something, a notice of some marvel. And he read these out in a particular dry voice, his newspaper voice, that was half mockery of the paper's own importance and half genuine pleasure in bringing you a small thing from the wide world. You sewed, or you did the accounts, and you listened, and you said, "Did they?" and "Fancy that." And the fire went down, and the lamp made its small circle, and that was the evening. That was all the evening ever was. You would give now everything the rules have left you to have one of them back, one single ordinary evening, the paper, the dry voice, the fire, the ink-stained hand, and you did not at the time think them remarkable at all. You thought there would be thousands more. He called you by a name that was not your name. You will not say it even here, even in the dark, because it is the last thing of his that no one else has touched, and to say it aloud even to yourself would be to spend a little of it. It was a foolish name. It began as a joke years ago, the kind of private joke whose origin a couple forgets while keeping the joke itself, so that by the end neither of you could have said why he called you it, only that he did, that he had always done, that it was the sound of being his. He used it for everything, to call you from another room, to wake you, to tease you, to say good night. It was the most ordinary sound in your married life, and it is the one you cannot bear, because the mouth that made it is the one in the ground, and no one living knows the name, and so it has died as completely as he has, more completely, because his body at least lies somewhere named, and the name lies nowhere at all, except in you, who cannot say it. There were plans. That is the other thing the memory holds, and it is the cruelest of the warm things, because the plans were so small and so certain. You were going to do up the back room in the spring. He had views about the back room. He had had views about it for 2 years. It was a standing joke between you, the back room and his views, and you had finally agreed that last winter that in the spring it would be done. There was talk of a week by the sea some day, when a little more was put by. There was the slow, steady plan under all the others, never quite spoken because it did not need speaking, of simply going on, of more winters like this one, more evenings, more of the dry newspaper voice and the cold hands on your neck, a whole long, quiet future of the ordinary, stretching ahead of you both, as solid and unremarkable as the floor under your chairs. You never doubted the floor would hold. Nobody doubts the floor. And then one ordinary week, it did not, and everything that had stood on it, the back room, the week by the sea, the 1,000 more evenings, went down all at once into a hole the exact shape of a man. And what was left standing was you, in a house you now keep with its eyes closed. You did not know that last winter that it was the last. That is the thing memory cannot forgive itself, that you walked through the final ordinary weeks of your whole life as though they were ordinary, because they were ordinary, because that is what last times almost always are, not marked, not golden, not lit up with any warning, just Tuesday and then Wednesday, the paper read, the fire banked, the cold hands, the foolish name called up the stairs. The last time he laid his cold fingers on your neck, you did not know it was the last, and so you only laughed and told him his hands were like a dead man's. God forgive you. God forgive the things we say in the warm, safe dark when we think there will be no end of warm, safe darks. The last time he read you something from the paper, you do not even remember what it was. The last time he said the name, you were half asleep and did not turn over. There is no ceremony to a last time. It wears the same plain clothes as all the times before it. You only learn after which one it was, and then you spend a year in the dark trying to walk back into it, to be awake for it this time, to turn over, to listen, to take the cold hand and hold it and not let the evening end.
But the evenings do end. They ended then every night, the ordinary way. The fire to embers, the climb upstairs, the candle out. And you let them end without a thought, because there were more. And they have ended now, all of them, the whole supply, and there are no more. And the cruelty is not that the last one was sad. The cruelty is that it was not. The cruelty is that your last ordinary evening with your husband was exactly as good and exactly unremarkable as 1,000 others, and that you spent it the way you spent them all, easily, half attending, sure of the floor, and that you would not change a moment of it even if you could, because to have known would have been its own kind of ruin, a last evening spent in dread instead of in the plain golden ignorance of two people who simply expected to wake up married in the morning. So here, in the dark, you do the only thing left to do with a year that has ended. You keep it. You go back into the warm room of it, the room with no rule on the door, and you sit in it as long as the night allows. The gate, the cold coat, the ink, the dry voice, the foolish name, the back room you never did up. And you let it be warm, and you do not, for once, make it sad, because it was not sad. It was the best of everything you had, and you had it, and no rule of mourning, no calendar of black, no stopped clock can reach back into that room and take it, because it has already happened, and a thing that has happened is the safest thing there is. They cannot stop a clock that has already finished striking. They cannot close the blinds on a light that has already been. You belong this year to the dead, but there was a year before the year when the dead was a living man who laid his cold hands on your neck to make you laugh, and that year is yours, still and always, and no one can take the having had of it.
There are mercies in this year. You would not have believed it in the first weeks when grief was a thing that filled the whole house to the ceiling and left no room for anything that was not itself. But there are. They are small. They are very small. They are so small that to call them mercies at all might seem an insult to the word. But you have learned this year that mercy does not come in the size you expect. It does not come as a great consolation, a sudden peace, a voice from somewhere telling you it was meant. It comes in pieces too small to be noticed by anyone who is not, as you are, counting, and you have learned to count them. 3 tonight. There are always, if you look, at least 3. The first mercy is the warmth of the jet. You have said how the crape gives nothing back, how it is cold in the cold room, cold against the skin, the smell of nothing alive, the cloth engineered to take the light and the warmth and return neither. You have lived inside that coldness all year, and you have stopped, mostly, expecting cloth to be kind. But the jet is not cloth. The jet is the small black brooch over your heart, the one with the lock of his hair set inside it, and the jet does a thing the crape cannot. It warms. It takes the heat of your own body, slowly, through the long day, and it holds it and gives it back. By evening, the brooch is warm against you, not cold like the cloth, not dead like the cloth, but warm, faintly, persistently, with a warmth that is only your own warmth returned to you, and yet feels, on the worst evenings, like something more, like the warmth of the thing it holds. You know it is not. You know it is physics and not Thomas, the simple property of a stone that takes heat and keeps it. But the heart does not keep accounts the way the head does, and on the nights when the cold of the cloth has got all the way into you, you put your hand flat over the small warm stone, and you let yourself feel, for the length of a held breath, that some part of him is warm again, that you have warmed it, that the one black thing you chose to wear is the one black thing that gives anything back at all. That is the first mercy, that in a whole costume built to be cold, there is one warm point exactly over the heart, and it is the one you chose, and it holds the warmth of your own keeping on, and returns it to you when the day has taken everything else.
The second mercy is the line of light at the edge of the blind. The blinds are down, and they stay down. That is the rule, and you keep it, the house with its eyes closed. But a blind is not a wall. A blind is cloth on a roller, and it does not quite meet the frame, and where it fails to meet, there is a line, a thin, bright seam of the outside day, no wider than a thread, running down the edge of the window where the blind falls short of the wood. You did not notice it the first weeks. You noticed nothing then but the dark. But you have come to know that line of light the way you know few things now, because it is the one piece of the living day the rules cannot quite shut out, the one thread of the bright, careless world outside that gets past the blind and into the room and lies along the wall, moving all day, slow as a hand. In the morning it is gray. By midday it is gold. In the late afternoon it reddens and lengthens and climbs the wall and thins and at last goes out, and you can follow the whole of a day by it without ever opening the blind, without ever breaking the rule, simply by watching the one thread of light the rule forgot to forbid. It is not much. It is a line no wider than a thread, but it is proof, laid along your own wall every single day, that the sun has not stopped because Thomas has, that there is a morning out there and a noon and an evening, that the world is keeping its hours even while this house has stopped its clock, and that some small bright piece of that world will find its way in to you, past the blind, uninvited, faithful, whether you are ready for it or not. That is the second mercy, that the dark is not complete, that even in the house with its eyes closed, there is one thread of light that comes in anyway, and moves, and means that the day is still being kept somewhere, by someone, on your behalf. The third mercy is the kettle.
This is the smallest of the three, and the one you would be most ashamed to name to anyone, because it is nothing. It is less than nothing. It is only the kettle. But hear it the way you hear it now. In the long, eventless day, in the silence that is full of small sounds but empty of any voice, there comes a time, usually the gray hour of the late afternoon, when the light at the blind has begun to redden, and the day is at its longest and least bearable, when you put the kettle on the fire. And the kettle does what a kettle does. It sits, it warms, and then, after a while, it begins to make its small private noise, the first faint singing in the iron,
the ticking of the metal as it heats, and then the slow rising mutter of the water beginning to move, a sound that climbs over minutes from nothing to a low domestic roar, the most ordinary sound in any house in England, the sound of every kitchen at every hour of every day since there were kitchens at all. And it undoes you a little every time, because it is the sound of life going on. It is the sound the house made when Thomas was in it, and will make when you are gone from it. It is the sound that does not know anyone has died, that has no rule of mourning, that cannot be taught to be quiet out of respect. It is the bright, stupid, faithful noise of ordinary living, rising in the iron, filling the silent room with something that is not grief. You make the tea you will half forget to drink, but it was never really the tea. It was the sound, the singing iron, the climbing mutter, the roar, the proof in your own gray kitchen that the small machinery of being alive still works, still warms, still sings, even here, even now, even for a woman in crape who has forgotten why anyone would want it to. That is the third mercy, that the kettle sings, that the most ordinary sound in the world still comes every afternoon into the most sorrowful room, and fills it for a few minutes with the plain music of a life that has not, whatever you feel, actually stopped.
3. The warmth of the jet, the line of light, the song of the kettle. You count them most evenings now, the way another woman might count her blessings or her debts, slowly by candlelight before the stairs. And the counting itself has become, you have noticed, a fourth thing, almost a mercy in its own right, though you would never let yourself number it among the three, because the three must stay three. That is the shape of it. That is the discipline that holds. But the counting matters. The counting is the small nightly proof that you are still a woman who can find 3 good things in a day, built to have none. That grief, however it has filled this house, has not filled it so completely that there is no room left for the warm stone, the thread of light, the singing iron. There is always room for those 3. You have tested it. On the worst days, the days when the cloth was coldest, and the silence loudest, and the stopped clock most unbearable on the landing, you have made yourself find them, and they have always been there, all 3, exactly where they were the day before. The jet warming over your heart, the light moving on the wall, the kettle climbing toward its roar. They do not heal anything. They do not bring him back, or shorten the calendar, or take off the black a single day before its date. They are not that kind of mercy. They are smaller and stranger, and, you have come to think, truer than that. The kind of mercy that does not end the grief, but makes it survivable, hour by hour, by the smallest possible margin, which is, you now understand, the only margin grief is ever actually survived by.
So you count them tonight before the candle, the warmth at your heart fading now as the evening cools, the last of your own warmth leaving the stone, the kettle long since silent on its cooling hook, its song spent hours ago, but still somehow in your ear. 3 small mercies, not enough to save a life, exactly enough to cross a day. And tomorrow there will be 3 more, the same 3 most likely, because that is the nature of small mercies, that they come again and again, faithful and unremarkable, asking nothing, given freely, the warm stone and the thread of light and the singing iron,
waiting in the long gray day to be counted by the one woman in the silent house who has learned this year that survival is not made of great things. It is made of small ones, 3 of them at least, every day, if you look. You belong this year to the dead, but the living world has left you 3 small mercies hidden in the dark house like coins in a child's hand. The warm stone, the line of light, the song of the kettle, and they are enough, just barely, exactly enough, to carry you from this candle to the next.
There is a clock on the landing, stopped at the hour he died, and never since wound. You have walked past it 1,000 times this year. Tonight, for the first time, you stop in front of it. You know its face better than you know your own. You have passed it on every climb to bed, every descent into the long gray day, every night of this whole black year. The clock on the landing, its hands fixed at the hour the house went quiet, its tick gone out of the world. Someone stopped it in the first hours, the way it was done, the way it had always been done, a hand reaching up to still the pendulum at the moment of death, so that the clock would keep that hour and no other, so that time itself would seem to pause out of respect for the one who had left it. You do not remember doing it. Perhaps your sister did it. Perhaps the woman who came to dress the house, but it was done, and the clock has held its breath ever since, its hands at the hour, its weights run down, its pendulum hanging straight and dead, a stopped heart on the wall, keeping the only hour the house was allowed to keep. And you have let it. All year you have let it. To wind it would have been unthinkable, a violence almost against the grief, a saying aloud of the thing no widow says, which is, time is passing, and I am still inside it, and I will go on past this hour, whether I wish to or not. The stopped clock was the truest thing in the house. It was the house with its eyes closed, made into a machine. It kept faith with him in the one way the house knew how, by refusing to go on. But the calendar of black does not stop, even when the clock does. That is the thing you have learned, walking past the dead face all these months. The clock holds the hour of his death, but you have served in real time, in the world's own unstoppable time, very nearly a year. The crape has bruised and bled and been renewed. The line of light has crossed the wall some 300 times. The kettle has sung 300 afternoons. And tonight, climbing the stairs with your candle as you have climbed them all year, you stop on the landing in front of the stopped clock, and you understand all at once and with no warning that the hour it keeps is no longer the hour you are living in, that you have come a whole year from that hour, carried by mercies too small to name, and that the clock, the faithful, stopped, breath-held clock, has been lying gently, lovingly, the way the whole year has lied, telling the house that time had stopped, when all the while you were walking forward through it, alone, in the dark, one small, accomplished day at a time.
And something in you, not grief this, something on the far side of grief, something you do not have a clean name for, something in you will not let the clock go on lying. So you set down the candle on the landing shelf, and you open the case. It is the first time you have opened it since he last did. That is its own small blow arriving quietly, that the last hand to touch this winding was his, that somewhere on the key, on the little brass winder hung inside the case, is the ghost of the last turn Thomas gave it,
some ordinary, forgotten evening when he wound the clock without a thought, because there would be always more evenings to wind it in. You take the key. It is cold and small, and it fits your hand as it fit his. And you find the winding holes in the dead white face, and you fit the key. And you pause, one last pause, the held breath of the whole year gathered into a single moment on a dark landing by a single candle. And then you turn it. The sound is enormous. It is nothing. It is only the small ratcheting click of a clock being wound, the catch and the draw, the weights beginning to lift. But in the year-long silence of the house with its eyes closed, it is enormous, a sound from the living world breaking into the dead one, the first deliberate, chosen, time-starting sound you have made in this house since the hour the other clock, the one in your chest, first stopped. You wind it slowly. You feel the weights take. And then, because a wound clock is still a stopped clock until its heart is set going, you reach in and you steady the long pendulum in your fingers, cold brass, the disc of it catching your candle, and you give it the small push that starts it, and the clock begins to tick.
Tick, and tick, and tick.
The pendulum swings and catches and swings, and the old familiar sound, the sound that was in this house every hour of your married life and has been gone from it a whole black year, fills the landing, steady, ordinary, alive, a heartbeat returned to a body everyone had agreed to call dead. Tick and tick. You stand in front of it with your hand still half raised, and you listen to the house being alive again, and you do not, as you thought you might, weep. You had thought, if you ever did this, that it would break you. It does not break you. It does something stranger and larger. It lets you, for the first time in a year, breathe all the way to the bottom of a breath, because the clock is keeping the time now, the real time, the moving time, and you do not have to hold the hour anymore. You have been the stopped clock. You see that now, standing on the landing. All year you have been the thing holding the breath, keeping the hour, refusing to go on in faith with him. And you cannot do it any longer, not because you love him less, because you have found in the warm stone, in the thread of light, in the singing iron, that you are, against all the rules and all the cloth and all the stopped hours, still alive. And the living must keep moving time. It is the one thing the dead cannot do, and so it is the one thing you can do for them. Go on, carry the hour forward, be the clock that still ticks. You do not set the hands to his hour. That is the thing you understand last and most clearly standing there. You do not turn them back to the time he died to keep faith with the old grief. You leave them where the winding left them, and you will set them tomorrow by the real day, by the line of light at the blind, by the world's own time, because to keep him you do not need to stop. You need only to carry him, warm in the jet over your heart, into all the hours still to come. The stopped clock kept the dead hour. The wound clock keeps the living one. And you choose on the dark landing, with the key still warm from your hand, the living one.
From their view, what you have done tonight is a small impropriety, perhaps even a hardness, a widow not yet out of her deep mourning, winding the death clock, letting time back into the house of grief before the calendar has given her leave. There would be those who would frown at it, who would call it unfeeling, who would say the hour should have been kept longer. From today's view,
from a world that has learned grief is not a debt to be paid in stopped clocks and unbroken black, but a country you must, in the end, walk back out of, carrying your dead with you rather than staying to keep their grave. It is the bravest thing you have done all year. And that is the reversal, the thing this whole long dark house has been building toward, that the deepest faith you can keep with the dead is not to stop, but to go on, not to keep the hour, but to wind the clock, not to be buried with him in a house with its eyes closed, but to open, someday, the blinds, and to be, when you do, a woman who kept his warmth over her heart through the whole black year, and then on an ordinary dark landing chose, for both of you, the living time. You take up your candle. The clock ticks behind you as you climb the last stairs, and it is the most beautiful sound in the world. And it does not stop when you reach your room, and it will not stop in the night. And in the morning, for the first morning in a year, there will be a clock keeping the hour in the house, the real hour, the moving hour, ticking down the landing in the dark while you sleep. You lie down on the cold side that was warm. You put your hand over the small black brooch, gone cool now, holding the last of the day's warmth and the lock of his fair brown hair with its single gray thread. And you listen, as you fall toward sleep, to the clock you wound, keeping the time you chose. You belonged this year to the dead, but the year is turning, and the clock is wound, and the hand that started it again was your own, and you belong now, a little, to the time still coming. The crape still gives nothing back, but the clock tonight gives back the hours.
140-some years from the night Agnes wound the clock, in a quiet room with a different kind of silence, a woman you will never meet opens a box. The room is in the London Metropolitan Archives, and it is cool, and the light is the flat, even light of a place built to keep things from fading. The woman is an archivist. She wears thin cotton gloves, the kind that handle paper that has outlived everyone who ever touched it before, and she works without hurry, because the things in these boxes have waited a long time, and another hour will not trouble them. The box in front of her came in with a house clearance, catalogued years ago in a few neutral words, and she is only now reaching it. She does not expect anything. Most boxes hold nothing but the ordinary residue of vanished lives. She lifts the lid, and inside, wrapped in tissue gone soft with age, there is a small black brooch. She turns it to the light. Jet, she knows the look of it, the warm black shine of Whitby work, set as a frame around a little oval of glass, and under the glass, woven flat by some patient hand a century and a half ago, a coil of fair brown hair. She knows what it is. She has seen them before, these mourning brooches, these pieces of kept hair. The catalogue card will call it mourning brooch, hair work, C 1870s, in the same neutral hand that named the box. What the card will not say, what no card ever says, is the thing she notices now, leaning in, that whoever wove this hair left in it, by accident or not, one single thread of gray, paler than the rest, kept where another hand could find it. And under the brooch, at the bottom of the box, there is a small stack of letters.
They are tied with a faded ribbon. Most are in one hand, a man's hand, the ink long since gone brown, the letters of a courtship, by the look of them, kept a lifetime. But one, near the top, is different. One is in another hand entirely, on paper with no black edge, and it has been folded and unfolded so many times that the creases have gone soft as cloth. A letter received and kept and never answered. The archivist does not know the story, She cannot know it. The rule that silenced the reply, the year of black, the clock on the landing wound at last on a dark stair. All of that is gone, past any catalogue's reach. But she holds the unanswered letter a moment, in her cotton gloves, in the cool, even light, and something of it reaches her anyway, the way these things do. The plain, unmistakable fact that there was a living person here once, that someone chose to keep the warm letter she was not allowed to answer, and the lock of hair with its one gray thread, and that she kept them together in the same small dark for the rest of a life no one now remembers. The archivist writes the card. She wraps the brooch again in its tissue. She ties the ribbon back around the letters, gently, the way you tie something you have decided to be careful with, and she sets them back in the box, and closes the lid, and the small black brooch goes back into the dark to wait some more, warm still the moment a hand holds it, cold again the moment the hand lets go. That is where we will leave her. Not Agnes. Agnes is long past leaving, long past the calendar of black, long since carried forward into all the hours she chose when she wound the clock. We leave the brooch, the kept thing, the small warm object that outlasted the grief and the rules and the woman herself, and surfaced faithful in a stranger's careful hands, still holding its one gray thread, still keeping its one unanswered letter, still saying the only thing it was ever made to say. Someone was here, and someone was loved, and neither the dark nor the years could take the having had of it. And you who have come all this way through the long dark house, through the cloth that gives nothing back, and the line of light at the blind, and the clock wound at last on the landing, you are nearly asleep now, and that is right, and that is well. There is nothing left to keep you. The clock is wound, the letters are tied, the brooch is warm in someone's hand, 150 years on, and the hour the house was holding has been let go at last. So let it go too. Close your eyes. The crape gives nothing back, but the night gives back the morning always, and it will give it back to you. Sleep now. We will keep the rest. Good night, from History for Sleepyheads.